Cineboys to Cinemen, episode 75.
75.
75. Hope you're well, wherever you are, whatever you're doing. This week, Mickey 17.
Yep.
Bong Joon-Ho's third foray into English language.
Yep.
As far as his films go.
Yeah, after Snowpiercer and... Am I right? Okja.
Yeah, Snowpiercer. Snowpiercer?
Snowpiercer and okja. I think Okja was a mixture of English and another language. I'm right
Korean.
thinking? Yeah, it must be. Yeah. Nice.
Yeah, so we're going to have a little chat about his filmography, some of the kind of dominant themes that tend to permeate throughout most of his films, and very much take centre stage in Mickey 17.
Oh, big time, yeah.
And also just talk about how his success, particularly in regards to Parasite, not necessarily reintroduced the world to Korean cinema, because that's a ridiculous thing to say, because it's been around for a very long time. But, you know, I think it cast a new light on it, which gave it an appeal, I guess, away from just the kind of like darkened corners of like sort of sweaty video stores. It felt like a more mainstream thing. Like more people were talking about like Korean cinema and television. Like, you know, Squid Game, for example, become a huge phenomena.
Yeah.
So lots to talk about. Oh yeah, lots to get into. Wearing shorts now.
Yeah.
It's the wheels have come off.
It's 20 degrees. yeah.
I'm
wearing my as promised.
Yes, your Ethan Hawke.
Ethan Hawke Sinister cardigan. The cardigan isn't sinister. It's from the film Sinister.
Nor is the man that wears it.
Oh, that's very sweet and true.
That's the kind of thing that, you know, the police will like play back, and they're like, or there'll be like some Netflix documentary.
Oh yeah,
and that'll be the first thing that plays back.
Yeah. And true. Echo.
True.
Yeah.
He found 3 bodies under his patio a week later. You know,
It'll just be Hannah like sitting down preparing for an interview. And, like,
putting the microphone on. I really had no idea.
Oh yeah. It was just a normal. Yeah.
That's such a horrifying idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void. Okay, so Bong Joon-Ho.
Yes.
I would say alongside Park Chan-wook, the director of Oldboy, is probably like, those are the two guys when I think of like Korean cinema in a kind of broad, more mainstream sense.
Okay, yeah.
Not mainstream in the sense that their work is particularly mainstream, but in the way in which, you know, they've kind of both managed to cultivate an audience that isn't just film fans.
Oh, mate, yeah. A lot of, Western audiences have accepted those films with open arms, especially Oldboy.
I mean, Oldboy was like the first Korean film I think I ever saw. And I think it's quite a sort of familiar tale for a lot of people of our age, but like it's a film you find when you're like 15, 16, 17.
Yeah.
And I remember being drawn to it because of the DVDs, the Tartan DVDs.
Okay.
Do you remember those?
Yeah,
I do,
yeah.
I've still got a few. I always kind of like associated them with like kind of like ultra-violent films.
Yeah,
weirdly,
definitely.
Which is, you know, not always fair necessarily, but yeah, I can remember seeing it, Oldboy, for the first time and just being completely taken back by it.
Yeah.
In terms of the way it was obviously it's sensibilities that I'm not familiar with.
Yeah.
You know, culturally speaking, of course.
Yes.
And the way in which they embrace a kind of there's a very sort of something very visually meticulous about Korean cinema, which I think sets it apart from any other cinema in the world.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm thinking of the long take in the alleyway as well.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Very beautiful sort of framing and very kind of like in terms of the production design and the sort of visual sensibility. I guess it's like it is kind of leaning towards that sort of magical realism. I think sometimes, especially in the kind of climactic moments of the film, it tends to be quite sort of vibrant and not very realist.
No, they have this way of kind of like, because I find that a lot of Korean films are kind of like deeply cynical about the way the world is.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, I'm sure that's not the case with all Korean films, but there's an element of cynicism in the kind of works of Bong Joon-Ho or Park Chan-wook, I should say.
Yeah.
That, you know, the way they approach it, there's something kind of, it's made not necessarily accessible, but more palatable by the fact it's quite funny and goofy.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I've always found that something that's, again, is very specific to Korean cinema. Like when I think about like Parasite, obviously the violence in the film is shocking,
Yeah.
as is the violence in like, I mean, to be fair, like the Vengeance trilogy gets pretty fucking bleak. I'd probably say Oldboy is probably the most light-hearted of the three, and that's saying something.
Yeah.
I'm not saying that they don't have an emotional wallop, but what I'm saying is like, I don't know, there's something about the way they present that cynicism and present this kind of, like this kind of critique of the way the world is, and kind of like these dehumanized sort of characters.
Yeah.
The situations that they find themselves in, and the manner that those situations are presented. There's a sort of, like a kind of a very humorous way of doing it, you know?
Yeah, there's like, I mean, in the case of Bong Joon-Ho, like for me, it's almost as if he gets like a posh dish, right? Like, I don't know, like caviar or something.
Is this like another food?
It is another food
okay.
analogy. I'm getting quite good at these.
Yeah.
No, but he takes something like sort of very like smoked salmon or something, like very sort of petite and meticulous and sort of presented really well. Just sticks a jelly baby in it. You know what I mean? Like with regards to
I hate
like, a
jelly
lot
babies.
of it. Yeah, I'm not a huge fan of them. Very good for if you're like on a long walk, apparently. But anyway. But he just sticks it in there, like, you know. I'm thinking Tilda Swinton's character at the beginning of Okja, for example.
Yeah.
She's kind of like all of the rich people in his films have really bright white teeth, which I think is quite funny.
Yeah.
And she's got this like strange sort of vocal inflection and like cool, and it ends with her calling pigs fucking delicious and stuff like that.
Yeah,
and it's just there's something really playful and really energetic, and that doesn't stop those characters from being interesting.
No,
they're not like one note stupid or kind of I guess like comic relief, but they are just so wacky and out there that the situation that presents itself to you is in like stark contrast to that.
Yeah.
No, I think it's an interesting way of doing it for sure.
Absolutely. I kind of find that with Okja and sort of Snowpiercer, and definitely with Mickey 17, some of the characters and the way where the actors play them, it does sort of border on these kind of on caricature slightly. And that's something I think we'll go into a little bit more when we talk about Mickey 17's kind of like it's kind of critical, its attempt to sort of critique the kind of the sort of socio-economic environment that we currently inhabit.
Yeah, and like work and the work environment.
Yeah, exactly. And I think with Okja, it's kind of the same. There is like these big performances. And everything's sort of dialed up to 11. But like you say, it doesn't necessarily negate or blunt the kind of thematic impact, but it definitely does bring it quite close to almost being unsubtle.
Yeah.
I find with his kind of Korean films, they're a little bit less like that.
Okay, yeah.
When I think about like even like his first film, Barking Dogs Never Bite, the nature of the narrative is quite sort of, I guess there's a kind of potential for wackiness, but it is kind of like, it feels a bit more grounded than his more kind of like, I guess, genre-focused efforts.
Okay.
Because like Mickey 17 very comfortably resides in the sci-fi genre.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you could argue Okja does a little bit as well, and Snowpiercer.
Yeah.
Like a dystopian sort of sci-fi film. But, like I feel like Mickey 17 is the film that is most set in genre, which is another big trope of Bong Joon-Ho's in the sense that he does play with genre very readily.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Mickey 17 is the most science fiction out of all of his films. I'd say
it's most committed to one genre.
Yes.
Out of all of his films, I'd say.
Yeah, because Snowpiercer gets overwhelmed with its kind of allegory, which is a good thing. It works for that film, but the allegory is more than the genre stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it's very obvious what he's trying to do, and he's not trying to hide that. But yeah, Mickey 17 is like, it's his first film set in space, so it's like, science fiction proper. It really like sort of digs its heels deep into that genre, for sure.
Yeah. It's weird that before Mickey 17, I even knew Mickey 17 was coming out so soon. When you just keep seeing a trailer and you think, God, it must be ages away. And all of a sudden it's out. And you're sort of surprised by it. But I watched, Mubi had one of his first ever short films on it called Incoherence.
Okay.
And it's a film about three different people men that hold very prominent roles in society.
Yeah.
And then they're in situations in which their role in society doesn't matter.
Right. Okay.
And I'm going to rather tentatively link this to a theory by, or the degree of trepidation, I should add, a theory by Irving Goffman, a sociologist, and he talks about how, like, certain job roles and their role in society are dependent on setting, backdrop, props. So, like, one of the characters, for example, is a university lecturer,
Right.
and he's obviously very, very astute, very valued. You know, he has his office, he has his books behind him.
Yeah.
They're like signifiers. They tell you this person is a well-learned man.
Yeah.
He deserves his position, and it gives him this kind of position over his subordinates who are his students.
Yeah. Okay.
And of course, like the way he dresses, the way he carries himself, these are all kind of little tells about the kind of role he has in society. And Bong Joon-Ho plays with those really in a really interesting way, in a really classically comical way. Like his storyline, it starts with him. He's just in his office reading a porn magazine,
Okay. Right.
and he puts it down and goes to his lecture, and he asks one of his students to go and collect some books from his office, and he realizes that he's left the porn magazine on his desk.
Okay. Yeah.
And it's about, I think it's like three sort of vignettes, but they kind of interweave by the end. But they're all like a few minutes long. It's only about half an hour long, short.
Oh yeah.
But it's about him trying to race to his office before she gets there.
Right. Okay.
And it's just really it's like hilarious. Like, it's really funny.
Yeah.
But you know, it's that idea that, like, if she found that porn mag, all of the everything about his image would collapse.
Yeah.
So in the
he'd be
same way that
human.
you're reliant on props to kind of like, you know, to give you this kind of position and this role, and you know, and to signify that role to others, all it takes is to have one prop that shouldn't be in that space to completely, for it all to sort of crumble.
Yeah. Shatter the entire illusion of grandiosity, right?
Yeah.
And he loves doing that. He loves shattering the illusion of grandiosity. In the case of his later films, with kind of like bizarre behavior and like weird teeth, and he likes sort of presenting to you a not necessarily entirely human, but like a very different look into people that are wealthy or of high social standing.
Absolutely. His films are about the kind of like abrasive interactions of different classes, I think. And you can see that with Incoherence, which is like, I think I don't know if it's his first short film per se, but you know, it's one of his first films, you know.
Okay, yeah.
And that's something that I always find that really fascinating when you see a filmmaker wrestling with something that they still, that you know, they're still wrestling with that when they become so astute. But right at the beginning, it's there. You know?
Okay,
and it's probably a bit of a trite thing to say, because obviously most filmmakers tend to have like one thing that they keep returning to.
Yeah.
But Bong Joon-ho is obsessed with it, and I think it does follow. It went to his first feature, Barking Dogs Never Bite. Again, like there's like a university lecture involved in that. Sort of idea of that is a guy that he's just getting annoyed at this dog that keeps barking, so he hatches a plan to kill it.
Okay,
and it just sets this sort of baffling series of events in motion that, you know, in a classic Bong Joon-ho style, kind of borders on ridiculousness. But like we said before, particularly with his sort of films from his native land, it's like they do seem to they just work. In the context of the confines of the world that he's created.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I just feel like it kind of they kind of permeate throughout all of his films, even films that are perhaps less focused on that. Like Okja is obviously more about, you know, the environment, isn't it? Which is another thing that he focuses on quite a lot. And the system that we live in, not only does it have an impact on those kind of like unbalanced power relations as far as class goes, but also how it affects our environment and how dangerous that is and damaging that is. I mean, Okja is a pretty unsubtle metaphor.
Yeah,
for
subtlety is not really his watchword, I don't think.
No,
but it does still work. Like, I mean, Okja for me was like I'm not actually a vegetarian, but it was the closest I'd ever got to becoming one, because it presents the idea that your kind of cuddly toy, as you had when you were little, is a living, breathing creature, and someone is trying to kill and eat it. And that is that's kind of what I got from and in a very kind of basic way. Okja looks like a cuddly toy, but one that has like lungs and a liver and a circulatory system, and is capable of love and affection, and is capable of receiving love and affection. And it's really just like, for me, that film is just about about humanity being the worst out of a kind of really interesting sort of plethora of different living creatures, and humanity is the one that is destined to be the most evil. That is sort of like what I got from Okja, and it really works. It really like throws you. It kind of makes you question your relationship with animals, really, and yeah. I love Okja, actually. I know it's not his highest rated, but
I think it's that unsubtlety that probably plays into it, and I guess confronting people with messages like that in this kind of in the way that things are, everything has to be very, doesn't it? And I think a lot of people saw it as kind of like vegan propaganda.
Yeah,
which is probably why a lot of people kind of turn their nose up at it. I think it's interesting. I think you're right. I like the inclusion of the child as the main character that sort of saves the creature. It's kind of like that thing where children haven't kind of, they're not privy to the kind of expectations of adulthood. Yeah, and they don't get sort of jammed through those expectations, and so they see things in a very absolute way. Like, why are you harming this? Why are you hurting this? And a child is never going to understand
industry,
right, the vastness of all these things. And as an adult who's perhaps well entrenched in that industry, or any industry for that matter, you would look at a child and just see it as kind of like, oh well, you'll learn, and you'll be just like me.
Yes,
but there's something to be said about that childlike viewpoint that, why are you doing that? It is just cruel.
It's just a radical idea, and as you get older, I feel like being radical is not a good thing to.
No,
it's
not. It's often associated with not growing up.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a good position to be in, especially obviously like being a radical person is in a lot of ways really troublesome. But I think when it comes to things like the consumption of animals and what that does to the environment and what that might mean for the animal if, let's say, it has like a soul, and obviously we can tell that they do think and feel and react to things. So maybe in that sense the idea is, because he's presenting it through the eyes of a child that has by default a more radical approach to the world, like it's a way of communicating a radical idea in a way that doesn't feel preachy. Obviously, that wasn't entirely successful. If you say people kind of thought it.
Well,
was
I mean, I'm not sure why. I was kind of more hazarding a guess as to that. I just assumed that
I can
in this kind of in the kind of everything gets dragged into absolute opposites, doesn't it? And and I think a lot of people that sort of pour scorn on the idea of vegetarianism and veganism, I think this film was never going to work for them.
No,
they were never going to buy into it. They're never going to even temporarily allow themselves to be swept up by any of the film's more powerful messages. But no, I just thought the inclusion of a child in the narrative, it was a very clever way of doing that, because like you say, children do tend to have quite a radical view of the world. But it's just disregarded, because it's like, again, you're not an adult, you don't understand yet. And all these things we've built for ourselves, it's almost as if like we're absolutely certain that these are the things that we should have and should be doing. And a child would look at it and go, well, this seems a bit weird and strange. And I remember thinking as a child, obviously not in this way, but like how indiscernible the world seems, especially the stuff that adults have built. And I also remember being quite keenly aware that a lot of adults didn't seem that happy.
Yeah, right.
Even as a child, you know what I mean? I don't know. I just think it's quite strange that you have all these adults around you telling you that this is the way to do it. And then I remember thinking, is it? Not that I knew any better, not that I necessarily still do it.
But no, that's an example of like a childlike radical idea, which is actually, carries some weight.
I think so. I do like that film, but I think we've touched on very briefly that his kind of more broader films, thematically speaking, tend to be his weaker ones. I think Okja falls into the camp of one of his weaker films. I think, and that's not to say I didn't like it. I still thought it was a very good movie. But I do think his more, again, his films, his Korean films, they tend to be ones that are a bit more subdued. And it allows him more space to kind of play with things that, like we've said before, the ideas around kind of like class. And obviously Parasite is his most literal attack on that, in terms of the way in which people covet that lifestyle and are prepared to do anything to covet that lifestyle. So to go from poverty to this kind of artless opulence. It's like they will do anything. It's the idea of it more than the actual thing itself that people are prepared to do anything for.
Yeah, definitely.
Which I think that was my takeaway. It was more the idea of wealth than actually having wealth that was powerful.
Yeah,
and drove the behaviour of the poorer family.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, the moment where they kind of inhabit the space of the wealthy before they kind of come back. Am I right? It's been a while since I've seen it, actually. That is the moment where they kind of turn and they realise that the idea, they buy into the idea, don't they? Because they start living it. And then that's what that kind of kickstarts the sort of moral dilemma. There's a really striking image in Parasite that really stuck with me, and it's actually a terrifying one. It's the one of the person in the basement looking up. It's that one shot of that person in the shadows of this. It was absolutely scared the shit out of me. I can't remember. You remember which?
And that signifies the kind of the tonal shift, which is Bong Joon-Ho's one of his calling cards, right? Is that kind of that ability to sort of be very playful with tone.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
But it's that, but in that instance, there's a playfulness to Parasite, which I think is part of it, the reason why it is such an excellent film. But it doesn't, as we've said before, it doesn't devalue the weight of that tonal shift and the impact.
Really, really works in that context. That's the bit that stayed with me. That shift is the bit that really made a huge sort of seared itself into my brain. Really unexpected moment. I did. I've only seen it the once actually. I'd like to see it again. Yeah. But it isn't. Again, it's still not subtle. But I think the fact that out of all of his films, or at least all the films I've seen, it's the least genre-focused one. It's like a kind of, I
think it's genre-focused in the transition from kind of like a sort of satire to a sort of thriller.
Yeah, okay.
Tinged with horror,
Yeah, argue, yeah.
Yeah.
For me, it was I suppose science fiction is quite stark and quite obvious. So I suppose in that way, that's probably why I thought it wasn't a genre focus. But yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it. So was it 2020 that it won the Oscar? 2019, probably.
Yeah,
something like that.
Yeah, fuck it, probably. Yeah. And that's interesting that it cleared up. I mean, that was actually one of the few times I think we've sort of joked about this before, but when you wake up in the morning after the Oscars and look at your phone and go, okay.
Yeah,
that's I think I'm right in saying that's as far as our relationship with the Oscars goes. But
pretty much, yeah.
But that was one of those moments I thought, oh, that's cool.
Yeah, definitely.
And it did kind of usher in a kind of, again, I'm not saying it reintroduced, but
sort of revival.
I just
stimulated interest.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that you saw Netflix all of a sudden they had a lot more Korean films and television shows, and then they started funding more television shows, and it just goes to show. We kind of shit on the Oscars quite a lot, but obviously the impact that had on the landscape and the way in which Korean culture was more readily accessible for mainstream audiences.
Yeah.
The impact was massive. I mean, kids got really into Squid Game, which, as far as I'm aware, is strange because it's an 18.
It's very violent.
Yeah.
Have you seen it?
Children, I've seen snippets.
Yeah, exactly. This is the thing that happened with Squid Game. It became sort of TikTokified.
Right.
There's actually a broad overarching theme to Squid Game.
Video game tie-ins as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
Sorry,
it's an odd. No, not at all. No, it's just because the sort of overarching theme of that show is actually kind of interesting and it's not unlike Snowpiercer or any of Bong Joon-Ho's work. Actually, it is about wealth and the kind of obsession with wealth and what how far would you go to kind of become wealthy, that kind of thing. It's pretty classic, but it's quite well done. And the problem, I think, was a lot of people digested it in a kind of very surface level. Oh, this is almost like Saw, like a creative kills, right?
Right, okay.
Because there's a kind of conceit in it, obviously, about the game.
It's like a game show, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
And you literally will be killed if you lose the game. And so the kind of this large group of people gets whittled down, and the winner is it's pretty straightforward actually. But it got sliced up and put on the internet, and people just saw it as a kind of like torture porn or something. I think anyway.
Okay.
But with a kind of candy cane aesthetic.
Yeah.
Which is weirdly appealed to
it goes
children.
back to, I think we're talking about the kind of more palatable cynicism.
Yeah.
You know,
definitely.
which I feel like Korean for cinema's absolutely excellent at. You know, it is interesting because I always kind of feel like if you think about the impact of Asian culture on the West, like in more recent time, you would say that Japan sort of had that cornered, right? I mean, anime.
Vast.
You know,
there's a bizarre. I don't know. Bizarre is the wrong word, but there is an obsession with Japanese culture that has bled into the West, which I think is like I don't find. You know, I'm happy to sort of. You know, obviously, I acknowledge that it's not for everyone, myself included, but yeah, it's fascinating just how pervasive it's become. And like you say, anime is definitely a signifier of that.
I feel like it's just interesting that Korean cinema is kind of look. It's always been there. We said that, like Oldboy, for example, the Vengeance trilogy, and even more recent stuff like The Handmaiden, which is a fucking excellent film. You know,
very good.
So it's been there, but I just remember I'd be in the staff room, people go, "Oh, this Korean thing. I didn't know the Koreans made." I heard that. Like, I'm not just saying
really.
This. I've heard that
wow,
several times. Like, I didn't know they did such good stuff, and I didn't. I nearly was that guy.
Well, actually,
have you watched Old Boy?
Yeah,
Oh, not him again. You know, just let him get a biscuit and leave. Smells like onions. You know, so I wasn't going to be that guy, but. You know, it was really interesting to me that it was seemed to be this kind of the time when Parasite did well. I'm not sure if it's wholly down to Parasite, or if it was just a coincidence. But these things don't tend to be.
No,
you know?
yeah, no.
And particularly in the world of streaming, you can feel it a lot more when something's being pushed.
Yes.
And I don't have a problem with that because you know it's an export of a country that have got an incredible filmmaking
stimulate
legacy.
their economy, like absolutely, yeah.
So it's no problem for me, but I just found it really interesting that was the case.
Yeah, definitely with Squid Game,
and that kind of those sensibilities are so popular in the mainstream, like, you know, very overtly anti-capitalist sentiments that, and like you say, perhaps get missed out on by a lot of people. Maybe, I don't know, but you know, there is just something to be said about that kind of the way in which those kind of, and it's not just a case of. You know, them having like, you know, in the case of Squid Game, I haven't seen it, so this might sound a bit, but like, you know, it's all like bright and stylized.
Yeah, sort of really pink.
Yeah, but like even like, you know, like Parasite, there is a kind of tone to it which does alleviate the kind of. I think it's really difficult not to acknowledge the kind of the way the film reflects on sort of capitalism's interactions with class and how it creates ideas around like appeasing class or fantasizing about wealth, the way that kind of like is like a disease to the human condition, you know. But yeah, I just think because those kinds of messages don't always tend to be that successful in a mainstream context.
Yeah,
and it's just interesting to me that it's Korean films and television that seem to be the kind of like driving force into the mainstream of that viewpoint.
Yeah, okay.
And yet they continue to be so popular.
Yeah, it is odd. I
mean, I'm totally there for it, but I just think it's interesting that it's that, you know.
Yeah, no, agreed. Yeah, I'm trying to think of like my kind of initial reaction to Oldboy actually, and how surface level I treated Oldboy. I remember it most for the hallway bit. Which is very surface level way of treating it because there's a lot more to it than that, and the twist, obviously.
Yeah.
The twist, which is quite bold and actually doesn't get talked about enough. Like people kind of talk about Oldboy as a very sort of style, like there's a lot of sort of stylized violence. They talk about it like it's Leon or something.
Right.
But the key difference is the big twist at the end, which gets forgotten. And I was quite surprised when it was revealed to me. You're right, because it does still kind of, it retains a playfulness, even
the scene where he's like yanking the guy's teeth out with a hammer.
Yeah.
There's like classical music being played over the top. I can't remember the name of the song, but you know, it's like, I don't know, like there is just something about it. It's almost like, you know, perhaps like Quentin Tarantino's playful nature around violence has kind of helped that. And obviously he was hugely influenced by East Asian cinema, like Japanese cinema, like the kind of Japanese martial arts films of the sort of 70s. With
Quite
Sonny
directly
Chiba.
influenced by them as well,
100%. I mean, he even had Sonny Chiba in Kill Bill, you know what I mean? It's like, you don't get any more direct than that. But so it wouldn't be surprising to me that obviously Korean cinema played a role in shaping his kind of relationship with violence. And then that relationship, the way he approaches it, having an impact on audiences, their own relationship with it, and perhaps making them more susceptible to kind of, I don't know, I feel like the influence on not just Tarantino, but Western filmmakers more broadly, because there is a kind of a very meticulous sense of craftsmanship in Korean films that I think Western filmmakers are definitely trying to ape more and more.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think actually it might be, a kind of ruling influence in that it started out Tarantino being influenced by kind of the Korean cinema and that sort of violence, and then paradoxically films after, because Reservoir Dogs was 92, wouldn't surprise me if Oldboy might have sort of tapped into that sensibility back from Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. I don't know.
It's just interesting, that interplay between the kind of different cultures and how, because Tarantino is obviously, and the reason I mention him is obviously it's not just him, I'm sure of it, but the reason I mention him in perhaps this rather tenuous fashion is because he makes no scruples about stealing from films,
Oh yeah, no.
So it was an interesting point. Obviously, I know Oldboy was 2003.
Yep, 03. Yeah.
So it's obviously quite some time. I think Tarantino was fairly well established by that point. But I don't know. I just think there's perhaps something in that. And but then the twist is horrible. But there is something, the way it's done. I don't know. And that's making
quite funny in a sense. Very darkly comical.
Yeah, well, that's Korean cinema. Not again. I'm sort of hesitant to say across the board, but like in terms of the more popular Korean films.
Yeah, right. The ones that Westerners.
We do tend to sort of zero in on that. It's got to be kind of like there's a sort of a palatable cynicism, a kind of wackiness, even in the most kind of grotesque and ultra-violent sort of way. I don't know. It's really strange that's kind of what we've, and I'm not saying it in a bad way. Like, I fucking love Korean cinema. Like, it was like, I think Oldboy might have been one of the first world cinema films I ever watched.
Okay, yeah,
they
are, early.
Because I had my friend. I think it might have been Jan and Fabian actually that pointed me in the direction of it.
Really?
I think they had like a few. I think they had like a few of those tartan. I think they had. Hang on. I think they also had Save the Green Planet, which is another Korean film.
Okay, right.
About a guy who, I think he's convinced someone, like some like corporate guy, like some guy in like a business, is an alien and like captures him in a basement and tortures him or something.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
Which again is like a pretty
conceptually, geez.
And again, like if you think thematically, the things we've been talking about, that's a pretty literal representation of those things. Like again, it goes back to that tartan thing. I remember they had like a few Takeshi Miike films, obviously a Japanese filmmaker, but that there was sort of mystique to them that I don't think really exists anymore. I think that.
Yeah, I know. I like the idea. I never did, but I liked the idea of collecting them all and having them as a little section in my kind of DVD. I remember I think I had Ringu or the Japanese
the original,
Ring, Tartan one. Yeah, there's a lot of East Asian cinema sort of found its way to tartan. I imagine, Oldboy included, and a cool steelbook as well. I got the steelbook.
Oh, have you? Very nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. Jealous.
Yeah, I think it's a Blu-ray steelbook as well. Just to add to that, add to that
makes
jealousy.
it all the sweeter, doesn't it?
Oh yeah. One of the things I just wanted to kind of pick your brains on about Snowpiercer, because it's been a while since I've seen Snowpiercer. It was talked about a lot before I finally sort of plucked up the courage to watch it. I think for some reason I remember seeing a clip from it and not being particularly taken. I was dead wrong because it's great, but in my mind the concept and the idea of that film is almost like it's a kind of very base surface level idea, almost like sort of 18-year-old stoner would think of that idea. And then somehow they pulled it off. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
it's sort of, oh yeah, well, it's like a train.
Yeah.
And everyone in the front of the train is all the rich people, and the back of the train
Yeah.
is all the poor people. And like it kind of sounds like a really surface level idea that would get discarded really quickly the next morning. But like it's that kind of idea done well. You know what I mean? And sort of throughout, peppered in that film is kind of like some pretty well choreographed set pieces, and again with that sort of I don't know what the right word is for it, but the sort of wacky wealthy right at the front, of just being so alien to the people at the back of the train that their behaviour is just bizarre and almost sort of like a Will Ferrell character.
Yeah.
What do you? I don't know what your thoughts on Snowpiercer are. I just kind of think that is how it plays for me.
Yeah, in a way, it's kind of like it's everything we've discussed in relation to sort of Bong Joon-Ho's work and perhaps elements of Korean cinema more broadly, in the sense that in this sense, it's kind of all pushed into a very literal narrative, isn't it?
Oh yeah.
Protein.
This protein is just like jelly, man. It's not going to taste anything. That's what all the poor people
insects
eat. It's like kind of protein pulped or like grubs or something. I don't know. But like again, it's an example of an idea of just, oh my god, man.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
That's what they read, the Communist Manifesto once.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, power to him. It is. It is not subtle, but but as we've said, that's Bong Joon-Ho's thing. Is
doing it well.
He fucking does it well because he has the energy. He has those sensibilities that allow him to take things that, like you say, could be done really, really badly, and running with them in a way with that kind of sort of sense of humor and the kind of zaniness in his characterization, his set design, his action set pieces, but also maintaining like that dark edge, the violence, and you find more and more about Chris Evans's character as the film goes on. He didn't he like eat someone's child or baby or something? Is that inferred?
I actually
in the
can't
film?
remember. I mean,
I'm pretty sure there's. I mean, if I've imagined that makes me look really fucking weird. But Chris Evans eating someone's child. But he's unafraid, and that's what I quite liked about it was that Chris Evans, obviously, I don't know when did that come out?
2009, I think.
2009. So he would have been Captain America by then. Or
just yeah, it was around the same time.
Yeah,
actually.
So he's got to play this kind of like squeaky clean kind of character who represents what America should have represented.
Yeah.
And yet he's sort of playing this kind of like grubby freedom fighter. And then the longer you stay with him, the more you realise how kind of, the circumstances of his life have driven him to the kind of desperation that, means he's committed some pretty sort of atrocious acts, which I liked.
Yeah.
Not the acts themselves.
No,
but
yeah.
in terms of that kind of like that kind of those bursts of nastiness that only shore up.
And then complexity.
It shores up kind of like Bong's critical intentions. It's not all like jokey and like haha. There are moments where like, oh blimey.
Yeah. Okay.
And perhaps we haven't spoken about that enough, but there are moments like that. Where you kind of like, and it sort of solidifies, it gives the critique a weight.
Okay.
I think about like, to go back to Okja, the scene where they're torturing one of the creatures.
Oh God,
Do you know what I mean? I remember like I think I watched that with a few people and everyone was like, that was horrible. They didn't want to watch it. And it's,
it's pretty stark.
Yeah. So he does have those moments in his films.
Yeah. He shocks you.
Yeah.
He shot me with Parasite in that like sort of mid moment.
Yeah.
Like a fucking like the Blair Witch Project all of a sudden. And he did that intentionally. I can tell he did that intentionally, and like obviously
he's gleeful about it. That's what I really like. I remember watching him in an interview. Obviously, he's doing a lot of interviews at the moment. He comes across as such a nice bloke. But, he would say like one of his favourite filmmakers, and the first time he decided to be a director, when he watched Hitchcock at the age of like 9.
Oh my God!
And you always wonder how much of it's sort of hyperbole with these kind of director interviews, but. Like you can see Hitchcock, that kind of playfulness with, there's a kind of like sardonic playfulness to his films that is only accentuated by the themes that he chooses to deploy those sort of ideas in,
Yeah, I'm thinking.
Like when I think about like like I think one of my absolute favorite Hitchcock films, Frenzy. You know, Frenzy is about a murderer, but it's really fucking funny.
Okay,
You know, and
yeah.
you know,
Rear Window is another kind of
yeah.
sort of a jovial. Oh no, he's broken his leg and he can't move, and like then he just sort of throws you into this pretty nasty, you know, like not a pleasant sort of thing to think about is like witnessing a murder from across the building, but you're still with him in his space.
Yeah.
And and it ends with a joke as well, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It ends with like him breaking his other leg, right? And that's a funny ending to. Yeah, no, I didn't think about
It's
it.
like gallows humour, isn't it? I mean, I know
Yeah.
Hitchcock had his demons and had his problems, and he wasn't always a very nice bloke.
No, yeah.
But like, you know, like he obviously had a sensibility that Bong Joon-Ho has he's mined from that quite a lot, and it really shows in his films. Yeah, no, I just thought it was an interesting little sort of segue.
Yeah, I didn't think of the Hitchcock connection, but yeah, it makes a lot of sense now.
Yeah.
Cool.
Oh. We haven't really spoken about his other big, like The Host, like a monster film. Have you seen?
I have seen The Host.
Yeah.
Yes. It
Again,
really-
a genre, playing with genre, like, and spending a lot of time with the family unit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. It's a lot of time in the sewers. Isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. I really liked The Host.
It's great.
I watched that before Oldboy. I think. I
Oh,
know,
right,
I know
okay.
it's different directors, but like I remember grabbing it in HMV, just thinking like, that's kind of cool. Like, I think I'd just seen Cloverfield, and I
Okay.
was quite into those sort of like it seemed
Yeah.
like, I think on the DVD it said like the Korean Cloverfield. You know, it actually isn't like that at all. It's
No,
like
no.
a lot better than Cloverfield.
Yeah,
but, yeah, like, but that's how I got introduced to The Host. And I didn't know it was Bong Joon-Ho until pretty recently, actually. But it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
a lot of funny moments in in the kind of family interactions juxtaposed against the entire, like, complete sort of total destruction of a city, and really interesting.
He's he's really good with monsters and creatures and critters.
And
They tend to give an emotional wallop that you don't necessarily expect. Obviously, Okja we've mentioned a few times, but even like the creatures in Mickey 17, you know, like, he's really good at kind of making things that initially make you feel a bit uncomfortable, like kind of odd looking or a bit repulsive.
These ones are like woodlouse.
But then he finds ways to kind of connect you to them in a way that you don't expect. I even kind of remember thinking that in the case of
The Host.
The Host.
Okay, yeah.
He's very good at it.
Peter Jackson-y kind of sensibility towards creatures.
You know, the best monster films, like, I mean, you know, like Godzilla and King Kong, right? The big daddies, the OGs. You know, they represent, you know, through their kind of relationship and connection to humankind. They, you know, you do connect with them on a level. You know.
Yeah. No, agreed. Yeah, he is very good at introducing a three-dimensionality to creatures and critters, something that we might naturally find quite confrontational. Mickey 17, I think one of the big strengths of it actually was that sort of playing with that idea, with the idea of natives and us not realizing that aliens might be so alien that the way they kind of construct their society and the way they behave might be vastly different from our own. That's, you know, that's not to say they don't, you know, are not capable of love and companionship and stuff. And he's sort of obsessed with that idea, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
About introducing, you know, letting the audience empathize with the sort of unusual and the bizarre. You're right in saying that it's one of the stronger elements of the film. I felt that combined with, because I thought it was at its best thematically when it was sort of interrogating how capitalism works on a granular level on human beings, like how it impacts like the relationships that they're allowed to form, mostly with a sort of large focus on romantic and sexual relationships. Oh right, yeah, okay.
I found that element of it to be quite interesting.
Yeah.
When they're on the kind of ship and they're going to the planet.
Yeah.
And they're sort of talking about it in sort of typically comical fashion about how sex burns calories. So there's almost like a ban on sex, because otherwise it'll put too much pressure on the kind of food production for the voyage.
Yeah, they don't seem to have any sort of reserves.
No. So it's a very fine balance that. too much rogering would upset.
Yeah, I sort of saw that as more of a, the idea. He's playing with the idea of a workplace imposing needless sanctions on its employees. For example, like asking for a fucking pencil sharpener, you have to fill out a form. An extreme version of that would be
it's like bureaucracy.
You can't have sex because it will directly and negatively impact the mission, and it's all about the mission, and it's not about you, it's about us. And I kind of thought that was what he was getting at with that side of things.
It's strange as well, isn't it? Because like the kind of the cause is almost about it's kind of like framed to the masses as it's about everyone, but ultimately it's about the kind of vanity of one man.
Yeah, a failed politician.
And that's kind of like, I guess, where the kind of critique's perhaps at its strongest on a granular ground level, on the terms of how it impacts people's ability to sort of forge meaningful relationships, but also about how that kind of power dynamic is presented to those people, in the sense that they're almost convinced that by doing something, pulling their weight in one direction, that they're doing it for something bigger than them. But in reality, it's being completely manipulated by one individual, especially in the digital landscape now, which I think a large part of the kind of marketing that seems to exist in the online space is all about growth and passive income and all those kinds of things. And it's all, you could be like me.
Yeah, mate. Imagine if passive income was that easy.
I don't know how it works.
Maybe we're just losing out, mate. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, I was expecting the passive income from this, but it hasn't happened. No.
It's not that passive, I don't think. There's quite a bit going on.
That's true. Yeah. We're working ourselves to the fucking bone here. No, it's just interesting. Like, it's a very unsubtle sort of nod to that, I think. These are, we're pinning our hopes on like 3 or 4 individuals whose intentions are completely selfish. And yet they've managed to convince people that they're not. This for the greater good. And, and if you oppose this, you're kind of the enemy of progress. And you deserve to kind of be silenced, or in the case of this, kind of imprisoned or blasted into some kind of like volcanic hole.
Oh yeah, you get turned into the material that builds Mickey again.
Yeah, I just thought that was interesting. I found that element really interesting. I mean, again, not subtle, and I think, if I'm being honest, like in the same way that I felt about Okja, like the lack of subtlety does hurt its critical intentions. I think, I think the overarching narrative of reprinting a human being, I think that's a cool idea, and they do it quite well with it. I felt it spent far too long introducing that concept. And it spent far too long on his backstory. I don't know, like it didn't.
The macaroon business and stuff.
Yeah. That was like, quirky, and it was like, even for like Bong Joon-Ho, we've said before, I've said it loads of times now, to the point of probably being insufferable. But that kind of wackiness, it does work. But when interspersed amongst the kind of like cold realities of the worlds that he's created, and I feel like it didn't have that in this film, in the same way that perhaps Okja didn't, bar a few scenes. But I feel like the critical impact of this film is blunted by the lack of those moments and an over-reliance on the silliness of it.
Yeah.
And that might make me sound like a miserable bastard, the same way I probably sounded really miserable when talking about the monkey last week. But obviously, like, comedy is an incredibly effective tool for, putting up a mirror to the society we inhabit. But I just felt that it lacked a punch. It lacked a real kind of emotive moment.
Oh, yeah.
And it relied on that wackiness. Again, like things like the macaroon business. And like even like things like Mark Ruffalo and Toni Collette's performances. It was like, obviously Ruffalo's riding on the coattails of his performance in Poor Things.
Yep.
And I actually didn't hate it. I saw a lot of people online really shitting on it. But, it didn't bother me that much because I kind of just find him quite charming, and it kind of doesn't bother me a huge amount.
He's like a buffoon, isn't he? And like intentionally, and it is very similar to what Bong Joon-Ho's done in the past with his other rich characters. It's pretty much following a thread. It did lack an emotional wallop though. There was moments where it could have blossomed as well. I found like there's a sort of very long, quite sweet take in which Mickey nearly kisses another woman. I can't actually remember the character's name, but it's not his kind of partner on the ship. It's another woman, and that never goes anywhere. that character kind of goes in a different direction, and it was an odd point in the film where I just thought, why include that if you're not going to sort of resolve it in some way that didn't involve just a kind of throwaway joke at the end about the two women not liking each other very much. I totally agree with the emotional thing. Like, it just wasn't there, and it was replaced with slightly irritating kind of wacky character traits. Like even Mickey himself, I sometimes found slightly grating.
Yeah, I think. I thought Patterson was very good. I thought he was again. I think he was one of the stronger elements of the film. But I agree. Like, there is just something. There's something missing in this film that blunts it, and I think it is that over reliance on that tone.
Yeah,
that he's usually very good at kind of being relatively. I don't know if we kind of said that enough in the kind of our opening remarks, but it does require restraint to be effective.
Yeah,
and I feel like he's lost that a little bit, and I think in the same vein with Okja, I think he takes a lot on board.
Yeah, yeah,
and in doing that, there are going to be thematic casualties. I think. Yeah, I didn't really feel like a great deal of connection to any of the characters, bar Robert Pattinson, really.
Yeah.
Again, that's perhaps an intentional thing. We talk about the relationship between this kind of like hyper sort of late stage capitalism and its impact on, the human condition, relationships, blah, blah, blah. Maybe that's the point, that the fact that relationships do feel a bit vague and uncertain. But
maybe.
I also felt like he was definitely trying to run with the relationships as one of the central character moments in the film. With like the ending, spoilers, but he gets the girl and she's in love with him, and it's quite sweet when like she's putting she ends up being the leader, doesn't she? He helps her put her clothes on. I thought that was quite nice, but there's just little moments like that are quite sweet, and then there are moments that are quite interesting thematically at the beginning of the film, as I said earlier, but. Nothing really meaningful happens with them enough for it to be an effective critique.
It's because Mickey seems to fail upwards as well.
Yeah.
The buffoonery of his kind of being makes it hard for you to identify with him, because he keeps making mistakes, and yet he keeps somehow sort of succeeding and getting the girl and kind of like being a hero. It's just weird. I thought
maybe it's
it
like
was
just
weird.
being like a sort of hapless and nice. Maybe it's like a sort of rallying cry to all the hapless.
Yes.
Yeah. Sorry, I don't know what I meant both of us.
Oh, mate, I know. Totally agree. Agree
I
with
was going
that.
to say haplessly cute, but I don't know. Fuck it. Let's say it.
Yeah. The camera distorts us. We're actually very lean.
Yeah. Gains.
Yeah.
Passive income. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know, man. I thought it really was missing something emotional, and I was the closest it got was those creatures, and then it sort of threw that away as well by the end. It ended with a joke about them, and I don't know. It was a shame, because I liked the idea of exploring almost like, maybe being a metaphor towards like kind of the Native Americans, right? And like how they were sort of invaded and it kind of was going in that direction, and I liked how they explored how their minds behaved, and how like how they would sort of swarm together to confuse the humans about which one was the kind of queen. I liked all that stuff, and I liked the conceptual stuff around those. What they're called creepers, aren't they? But and then it just sort of whimpered out.
I think you're right that the film is conceptually very strong, but its execution is what lets it down.
Yeah.
But in terms of like performance and laughs, it does achieve. It
is entertaining.
It is fun. Like, I think that's the kind of thing to stress, is that the film is very confused in what it kind of wants to say and how hard it wants to say it.
Yeah.
But in terms of laughs and that, it does deliver. I mean, in the cinema, like, obviously it's difficult to use like one group of like 30, 40 people in a cinema as a microcosm for the general viewing habits or the relationship between the general public and a film. But people were laughing, and were enjoying it. And a lot of people, I always quite like waiting like out in the foyer just to hear what people say as they come out.
Oh,
do you know what I mean? I quite enjoy doing that.
Snippets of review.
Yeah. I also had to go to the loo and came out. I actually had a bit of an embarrassing thing in the cinema. I had to go for a poo.
Oh, right.
And the flusher didn't work.
Oh, mate.
Yeah.
Was this during the film?
No,
or
no,
right
just
afterwards?
before.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I didn't realise. If I'd known before, but you'd never go into a cubicle and just think, I better flush the toilet before I do it.
Yeah.
You never think that. Like, no one ever does
No.
that.
You assume a degree
But then the
of
person
competence.
cleaning it would probably be thinking, why didn't they flush it beforehand? And I'm so sorry. I don't know
Which
why I
cinema-
mentioned this. Why did I mention this?
That's all right. Which cinema was it? Out of interest.
Oh, I don't know if I want to mention
okay,
it.
maybe not.
Yeah. But as if anyone cares.
Yeah.
Like I went to the toilet and came out, and I was waiting for Georgia to come out, but by and large, I do like to wait and hear people come out and go, "What the fuck happened to that toilet?" And they're like, can you just talk about Mickey 17?
That's
You
really
know,
funny.
I quite enjoy, and a lot of people walking past them are really positive.
Oh, really?
And that was nice. Like, I was just, even if my reservations, I like to hear that. I like, because it's good. Like,
It is entertaining enough to elevate it above mediocrity.
oh, fucking hell yeah. It's
Yeah,
enjoyable.
It's like a 7 out of 10, and I think we've spent a long time talking negatively about it because there is a lot to critique. But ultimately, as a cinema experience, I actually did have quite a positive one. I was let down in a lot of ways, but I didn't come out feeling annoyed that I'd spent £13.50. Thanks, Cineworld. So yeah, no, I can see why people's reactions were quite positive.
I just think it's because that Bong Joon-Ho's, his critical eye has been so sharp before.
Yeah.
That that when he does something that just, I think it just heightens the kind of disappointment in that way, thematically speaking.
I think, it's good, but from him, you've come to expect great. You know what I mean? And that can happen quite a lot with a lot of filmmakers that you admire. Like, I sort of kind of remember feeling that about that. Have you seen Trance? Because I'm a huge Danny Boyle fan.
Do you know what?
Right?
I haven't seen Trance.
It's
no.
like that. I remember
Is that
coming
with
out.
Rosario
of it.
Dawson?
Rosario Dawson, James McAvoy.
Yeah.
And
I remember the trailer, I think.
I'm such a big fanboy.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking that was good, but I expected great from you, and I kind of it put me a sort of odd, quite uncomfortable feeling because my allegiance to him is sort of unwavering, but I was conflicted in my own mind about the quality of the product, and the same thing kind of happened here. I was like, I did expect slightly more from you, however, it wasn't a bad time.
No.
Right? And I like Robert Pattinson as well. I really think
He was very good.
he was very good. He was doing a kind of like sort of Johnny Knoxville-y sort of voice, I thought. Or is it Steve-O? Is it Steve-O? I kind of talks like, that
Steve-O would be the
maybe
one.
Steve-O, yeah.
Okay. I didn't think that, but I could see, okay.
Yeah, I was just sort of thought it was gravelly and he was quite lean as well. I think he's lost a lot of weight for this role because I think the idea is that surviving on the bare minimum of your calories. Yeah. So he's quite gaunt in this, and he's really down on his luck. And I think he actually plays those roles quite well.
Oh God, yeah.
Slightly better than any other role. I think he's better when he's troubled, like High Life, for example, which is weird, a bizarrely similar movie in a lot of ways, in a lot of the sort of thematic. Or just the fact that it's Robert Pattinson in space, maybe, I don't know. But, he was good in it.
Yeah, he was.
As was, like, Toni Collette. I think Toni Collette, I always, like, really enjoy her in anything she's in. I think she's great. Mark Ruffalo, agree with you on his performance as well. It's a very...
inoffensive, but it's...
blatant Donald Trump sort of caricature.
Yeah, and it's funny because... to criticise those things is to suggest that I'm not on board with the critical intent, which is not true at all. But I do find that as figures like that, they become, their kind of influence on the world becomes more and more apparent. I think satire has to be smarter to handle that and manage that.
Yeah, okay.
Like, I always think about the SNL stuff with Trump, and everyone's like, it's hilarious. I was like, it's not hilarious. I just didn't...
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's like you're kind of like, you're basically, he is
he sort of needs to be ignored. I think.
Well, I don't know if maybe. Well, yeah, I guess maybe. But I kind of mean more that, like, in the sense that his behaviour, it's so outlandish. It's for like someone of the role that he has, but like it's become normalised,
Right,
and yet
yeah.
the people that are satirising him don't seem to have realised that.
Yeah, okay.
They kind of just do a caricature of him, and it's like, well, but he's like that anyway.
Yeah, yeah.
And I just kind of felt that in the same sense with this, with Mickey 17, it was like the kind of satire of these kind of big the billionaire class.
Yeah, yeah.
I don't know, it just didn't feel very clever. It's becoming increasingly difficult to make good satire because the things that they satirise, that wackiness, it's part of the everyday.
Yeah, it's actually not
Too far
removed. Yeah, it's kind of like why they're not doing the thick of it anymore. That's what Armando Iannucci said. He's like, I'm not doing it anymore because it's not funny anymore.
Yeah,
like it's actually,
yeah.
it's at a level which like we could just be filming reality. now.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
why would
yeah.
I do that? I want to be
Yeah.
heightening it and making it ridiculous.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in that respect, I can kind of see why it sort of falls flat in that regard. Yeah. It hasn't done very well. I know. I remember you sort of messaging me about this and saying like, "Oh wow, it's really not." It's
Despite the fact we just spent the best part of half an hour sort of picking apart the things we didn't like about it. I'm always pleased to see a film like this do well, even if I'm not that keen on it.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
again, maybe to say I'm not keen on it undersells. I did actually quite like it. God, this is what you come for. Certain,
I liked it. However,
concrete opinions. We just so non-committal, aren't we? So flaccid, so critically flaccid. It's sad to see it not do well.
Yeah.
Because I think it's the mid-budget or film. I mean, this isn't mid. What was the budget for this?
110.
Well, it's not really mid-budget, is it? But
It's on the cusp of being.
I think modern mid-budget, right?
Yeah. Considering the Electric State was 320 million.
Fucking hell. I am going to watch that.
Oh right, okay, yeah.
I saw the thing. Film Angle Boys did an episode on it. I'm going to listen to that. I'd be interested to know what they think.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But I might watch it. I might listen to it first, then watch it. I don't know. It'd be a bizarre exercise. Because it's obviously going to be fucking utter wank. So it's not like I'm going to lose out on anything. But yeah, you're right. I feel like there's very few filmmakers these days who can get away with making films like this. And as unfocused as the satirical elements were in this film, like, I'm glad it exists.
Yeah.
And I'm glad that filmmakers like Bong Joon-Ho are allowed to make these kind of films. I think Parasite gave him grace in the eyes of major studios. And I hope that doesn't dull their enthusiasm for him.
Oh, same. Yeah.
Because when he hits, he fucking hits. And even when he misses, like, you still enjoy his misses. And this is one of those examples.
Yeah.
But, I don't know, like, we're crying out for them, and yet when they come, they don't tend to do well. It just makes me wonder just how, I don't know, like, it's so unpredictable.
Yeah, it is.
You think the moment you think you've cracked what people want, they go and surprise you, and then
don't turn up.
turn up.
It's funny, like, it's not doing dreadfully.
No.
It's just not. It's basically not going to turn a profit for a while, and I think Warner Brothers. That's a problem for Warner Brothers at the moment, who are suffering.
Yeah.
I really hope it doesn't tarnish his reputation, and I really hope that he, Bong Joon-Ho, goes away and kind of, takes the hit a bit and.
Well, goes back to something smaller.
Just going back to sort of 15-20 million mark, maybe even going back to sort of native language, and I think there's nothing wrong with that, and I think it's
of course not.
Healthy way to be, and fair play to him for having a crack at $110 million science fiction film based on a novel as well. Like, is it the first time he's adapted something or worked with a writer at adapting
I
something?
don't know.
I'm not too sure, actually, but... Mickey 7 was a novel, so I know it drastically alters from the book. It's one of those,
Right?
But it is, arguably you could level some of the criticisms we've had on the source material, not necessarily
Right.
the
I'm not
filmmaker.
familiar.
as
I knew
well.
it was based on a book, but I only knew that when I saw the credits. It's a bit embarrassing, really. But.
Oh no, that's fair enough. Like, I think, we're not going to see it because we're fans of the book.
Yeah. Fair point.
It is a shame though. I really wish it. I hope it breaks even eventually, because it deserves to. And
Well, I was chatting to one of my mates recently. He said that it's coming on streaming really soon.
Yeah,
apparently,
Warner Brothers
which
do
is
that.
usually a sign, isn't it? It's not a good sign if they're pushing it onto streaming early doors.
Yeah, it's kind of ironic, really, that the film is a critique on sort of billionaire culture, and yet it's a victim of it as well.
Well, we talk about that quite a lot, don't we? The
Yeah.
inherent contradictions that this industry is always going to be sort of
Yeah,
beholden to.
marred by
Because of the nature of how this industry is representative of the system that it critiques.
Yeah.
So there's always going to be a conflict of interest, or not that it should necessarily blunt the intentions of the filmmakers themselves, and even if the satirical elements in this sense are a little bit more misguided. But no, I agree. It's sad, and I think the industry is crying out. It's a gap that's been vacated for a very long time now. I think we've said this a lot, but the decline of physical media, the mid-budget film is just non-existent.
Yeah.
And when they come along, it just seems to be, it's a very sort of tricky area. Like sometimes they do well and other times they really don't. And it doesn't seem to be any kind of like any set or fixed parameters as to why that is.
No, it is just so nuanced. It's difficult to analyse, really. I do think there is a general issue with mid-budget science fiction. Like it actually is doing pretty typically. It's not doing like, compared to other science fiction films with the same kind of budget, it's actually performing, at around the same level. So it's not a bomb.
No.
It's just a bit of a whimper, and that can happen. Like Jupiter Ascending, apparently, is doing basically the same money, apparently, which is odd.
Great company.
Yeah, oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I also thought the marketing could have been better. I thought
The trailer was shite.
Yeah, really bad. And a lot of the posters I thought were really odd as well. I think I discussed this in the last outro, actually.
Maybe shite's the wrong word, but it didn't inspire.
Yeah, it wasn't.
If that's a trailer, I avoid trailers
Yeah.
as best as one can.
Yeah,
but
going to the cinema, like, it's hard to, isn't it? No.
I just go, no! For like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
I know, but I remember thinking, God, that's not a good trailer, really.
It wasn't. And nothing about the marketing was good. It didn't actually lean on Parasite enough, I don't think. It didn't remind audiences like, oh, do you remember this film that you really enjoyed? It's the same film.
This is the reason why Warner Brothers have given this guy a lot of money. And marketed it really poorly.
Yeah,
that's interesting.
It is just another reason why it might not be doing so well. It's just not a very creative way of and like, being creative is a risk. So if you've got an expensive film on your hands, you're going to want to market it to the masses. But I really think that was a mistake. And they, should have done better. But there we go. Yeah.
It does have a vibe of being like a film for film fans feel to it.
Yes, yeah. That's true. And I don't know. It deserves to be more than that, I think.
Yeah.
But there we go.
Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
Well, there we have it then.
Yeah.
75 episodes. Not too shabby.
Yeah.
It's a lot. I
Yeah.
like it. Yeah.
We're not that far away from 100.
Oh,
if
baby.
my maths serves me well.
Yeah.
Yeah. Crazy to think.
I know. Yeah, it's really interesting. Really, pleased with that. That's good.
Yeah. Mickey 17. Sorry, I just threw that in there.
Watch it. I'd say go and see it.
So support director Bong. He needs it.
Yeah, definitely. And expect a good time. And expect
more than anything else.
Yeah, expect the sort of kind of the sort of critiques to be very broad and very obvious, and that's not necessarily anything wrong with that. So yeah, good stuff.
Yes. Next week, March is a shit time for films at the cinema.
Not good. Yeah, nothing jumped out at us really.
No, there's a few films that I'd like to try and catch, but I just don't know if it doesn't mean there isn't good stuff on. Like there's that I'm Still Here I'd really like to catch.
Yeah,
but I just don't think it's possible to.
It's fine.
Yeah, so we're going to go for another Hidden Gems episode.
Yeah.
And we've got Big Trouble in Little China, which was Jack's suggestion, and The Raid 2, which was
Dale's. Yeah.
So we'll be in touch with you guys and get your kind of reasoning for choosing the films.
Yeah.
And then we'll kind of build on it ourselves.
Definitely.
They can be foundational to our sort of epoch-shattering film criticism and analysis.
Absolutely, yeah. Looking forward to revisiting both of those, actually.
Yeah, I saw Big Trouble in China fairly recently, but The Raid I've not seen for a long old time. So
Yeah, they were quite big for a while, and then they kind of petered out, and nobody talks about them anymore. So maybe that could be one of the reasons why Dale picked them.
Yeah, fair play. Yeah. Looking forward to doing that.
Yeah.
Also, we're thinking about Marching Powder.
Yes, the film.
Yeah. By God, we need some.
My God, yeah.
Because obviously Alfie was there for our. He is the.
He's the coiner of blokesploitation as a
it.
term, yeah.
And it wouldn't feel right to not have him on.
I think we have to, yeah.
Yeah. So we know it's out, but yeah, to revisit that wonderful cluster of films.
Yeah,
we have to have him on. So that is in the pipeline.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to ask him, actually. If you're listening, Alfie.
The pipeline, is it? Fuck. What a load of shit. We've not even asked the guy. We probably won't ask him. We'll probably forget. And he'll probably just see this, and that'll be our way of asking him.
Oh, man. Yeah, he'll just text me and be like, yeah, I am up for it. Like, oh, good. Yeah.
Why didn't you message us? Oh. Yeah, but that's something we really want to do because it's such a fascinating topic.
Definitely,
and it's interesting to see it sort of brought back to now.
Oh,
because the sort of ideals of those films feels very set of that time, I think, as Alfie said.
Yeah.
Way back when we did the blokesploitation episode.
Yeah, I'm really interested to see how that has matured, if it has. But
Yeah.
it seems like the film does touch on sort of slightly, very blokey, but sort of slightly serious themes, which is an odd one for Nick Love. So we're aware of that. I think we'll try and gear it for when it kind of gets released on home streaming or something like that.
Yeah, which I'm sure it will do.
Yeah.
In the meantime, thanks for getting to the end of another episode.
Yeah, thank you.
Much appreciated. And we'll catch you in the next one.
See you then.
Take it easy.
Bye.